This side of the
All
Vote
right.
Local. Good.
All right.
Great.
Vote local, everybody. I'm smiling.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, good. There you go.
All right.
Okay, well, it's great to be back here first. As you know, we are completing our 62 county tour. This is my 22nd 62 county tour. Before I do that, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Today is actually my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I'm going to tell a little story, which I always like to tell stories. We have a few minutes. It's not that cold. This is my Thanksgiving story. So I was born on Thanksgiving Day. And my mom went into labor about 5:30 a.m. Thanksgiving morning, and my dad got into their car, which was called a Packard. Who's heard of a Packard?
I have.
Yes. Made in Buffalo, New York.
Yay.
And drove her to the hospital where she was giving birth. It was called French Hospital. It was run by an order of French nuns, but it was at 29th Street and 7th Avenue in the middle of Manhattan. Why French nuns had a hospital in the middle of Manhattan, I don't know. Maybe they like to visit. But the location is important, as you'll learn in a minute. So my mom got there at about 7:30, and this is the old days. You didn't have the husband or the spouse in the delivery room and all that nice touchy-feely stuff. They sent the men down to a little room where they'd pace the floor, smoke cigars, and wait for the blessed event to find out if it was a boy or girl, which you couldn't find out then. But this was at 29th and 7th Avenue, and my father's a free spirit, and what did he realize? It's 9 a.m. Thanksgiving morning. He's only 4 blocks from Macy's. So he went to watch the parade. He watched the parade for 3 hours. At the end of the parade, a friend of his tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Why don't we go into this local pub here and celebrate the upcoming blessed event?" He did. P.S. I was born at 11 a.m. My dad showed up at 4 p.m., precipitating the first fight my parents had over me. But they celebrated their 71st anniversary in April. He's 97, she's 92, so it didn't do too much damage. Okay. So this is my 22nd year of the 62 county tour, and I'm going to talk why I do the 62 county tour after I get into the substance here, and why it was so important this year. This is the most important 62 county tour I've ever done because of COVID and what we're discussing here today. I learn, and then I translate that learning to crafting legislation that's good for New York. So I first heard of Field Goods when I visited here as part of my tour in 2014. It's amazing how the company has grown under Donna Williams, who was the company's founder, and Michael Waterman, the new CEO. Welcome. This big, nice warehouse wasn't there when we were here. And I understand that with winter arriving, there are a lot of things to be concerned about during these times. But one of the things that motivates me is how New Yorkers have come together during this crisis and supported one another. And if they can't literally hug one another, we have figuratively hugged one another and helped things going. And that includes incredible sacrifices made by our small business people like Field Goods to stay alive. However, many of the small businesses in the capital region we know are hurting and on danger of disappearing. I have great sympathy for small business people. My dad was one. He was an exterminator. He had a little exterminating business, not very successful, the opposite of your business. He killed things. You deal with live things. But he's sort of funny. My dad, he's 97, as I mentioned. He said, "I'm 97. How bad could DDT have been?" Because he was an exterminator. Anyway, but I saw his struggles and how he went to bed worrying. He would pace the floor Sunday nights at 2 a.m. because he hated going to work. So I know the struggles of business people, and it's worse now because of COVID. It's put so many burdens on them that businesses here in the capital region have gone out of business or in danger of going out of business, and we have to stop it. And that's why we're pushing the HERO Small Business Lifelong Act as part of Lifeline Act. We're pushing the HERO Small Businesses Lifeline Act as part of the larger COVID package. And that will allow the small businesses of the capital region, those businesses that have under 500 employees, to survive. The situation here in the capital region is stark. According to the New York State Department of Labor, the Albany, Schenectady, Troy MSA, which includes Greene County, private sector jobs fell over 10% last year. We need critical federal relief. Many of the people who lost their jobs the majority worked in small businesses, businesses under 500. And so let me level with you. When they first rolled out the small business program, it wasn't really good for the smallest of businesses. But we straightened it out in a second run, and it is now a lot better, and it will help companies like Field Goods, which benefited the first time out, from benefiting again even in a better way. We have to do something for small businesses that have been hit so hard by the pandemic. As I said, the original PPP program was designed to help small businesses, but if you knew a banker in a fancy bank, you got the money first. We changed that in the second because we are specifically designating the money to the smaller businesses. Even if you don't have a fancy banker, you will be in line for it. The Capital Region's small businesses employ fewer than 200 people. There are 1 million of those in New York State. Can you believe that? 1 million small businesses that employ fewer than 200 that have suffered the most will benefit the most from this program. And if we don't do anything, we could lose so many small businesses. We could lose a third of them. There are now 57,000 small businesses in the Capital Region, so you can figure out what that means. So, we're pushing now for this new program. It will allow a second PPP loan that will offer a chance for the small businesses to survive. It will also make the loans more accessible, as I said, to the small businesses. And by the way, we made it eligible for nonprofits. I pushed for that. 18% of our businesses in the Capital Region are nonprofits, and they often supply the critical services, providing food or shelter or whatever that people need. So we made sure that they would get them. The businesses that have smaller than 200 employees get the money first, just like this one here. It applies to sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed borrowers. And it will allow the loans to become grants in a much easier way than the previous one. So this is money in the pockets of these businesses, which will then pay their workers, pay their rent, pay their utilities, and keep going. And God willing, a year from now, this crisis will be much less virulent than it is today because of the vaccine. So we have to get this passed. We need to send a lifeline to our small businesses. Let me give you some of the terms. It's in the press release, but I want to just make sure people hear them of what the PPP program, the new one, will do. It extends it through the end of March 2021. It's a forgivable loan, which means it becomes a grant. It reserves 10% of all funds for businesses of 10 employers or less, creates a set-aside of $15 billion for community lenders, the small community lenders like CDFIs that have the greatest eligibility. You'll be happy to know this. Not only does it include nonprofits, it includes smaller newspapers, radio and TV stations, which are suffering and are vital. They don't have the advertising and they don't have anything else. I got that provision in there. And it increases the money for what's called 501c6s, local chambers of commerce, which have not been allowed to participate so far. So it's a very comprehensive bill. It will keep our small businesses going till we get through this awful crisis. Now, let me say something about my 62-county tour that I do every year. I started doing it, you may remember, when Al D'Amato, who was the senator, said if Schumer wins, when I was running against him, you'll never see him west of the Hudson. And so I promised, God willing, if I won, I would visit every county my first year. I did, and I learned so much that I've done it every year since, 22 years. During this COVID, this is the most important 62-county tour that I've done because it informed me of the great needs of New York State during the COVID crisis, and I took what I learned in the 62-county tour and crafted it into legislation. Coming to a place like Field Goods. I was at a place called the Canal Emporium in Wurtsboro, 200 years old, two brothers in the family, ready to go under unless they got help. I visited a hospital in Orleans County. I visited Orleans County. They have no testing for COVID. We wrote in the bill legislation should be sent to every county for testing. You'd have to go to Rochester or Buffalo to get testing. I went to Nathan Littauer Hospital, not far from here, in Gloversville. They'd go under if they didn't get aid. We got them aid in the first bill, and we're getting them more aid in the HEROES Act, if and when we pass it. But we already got them aid that kept them open. I went to the Palace Theater in Albany, closed, because our venues, our theaters, no one can come. You can't sit people close together. That's a vital part of Albany. And we put in a provision called the Save Our Stages Act, which allows those stages to get the aid that they need. I went to visit small churches. No collection plate because no one's gathering on Sunday. These churches are so important to our communities, we put them in the bill. So every time I visited in upstate New York, the 62 counties and downstate, I learned, and then I took the knowledge that I got and crafted it into legislation that in the first CARES bill helped save hundreds of thousands of small businesses, including tens of thousands here in New York, and we'll do more in the next bill. So you cannot be a good senator if you just sit at your desk, take telephone calls and read. You have to get out there and meet the people. During the COVID crisis, we've had to change the way we meet people. I used to go to a hospital and meet 100 nurses and talk to them. Now when I go to a hospital, I meet 6 nurses who are spaced apart. But I still talk to them and learn what they're going through. And so we've done this. If this was a regular meeting, we'd be closer together. And we're not. But it doesn't interfere with the knowledge that I gather as I visit the counties and then take it and then write legislation that helps people. I authored the original CARES bill with Mnuchin, the Secretary of Treasury. Lots of the input of the tours was in that bill, including the PPP program, which saved this business and many others. And I'm doing it now as we try to get the Save Our Heroes Act passed in the closing days of the session. With that, do you want to, who's going to say something? Michael Waterman, CEO of this great business. And we're going to clean things off.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Michael. By the way, you're not supposed to fist bump, because if you use your fist, it touches your face. Anyone whose elbow can touch their face shouldn't do an elbow bump. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Senator, and to your team for making the trip here. I am Michael Waterman, the CEO of Field Goods and Hudson Harvest, our sister company. And Donna's over here to my right, founder of Field Goods. Nearly 10 years in business here in Athens. So we are so grateful to you and your team for everything that you've done. To give you a quick story, pre-COVID, Field Goods delivered to about 1,500 to 2,000 individuals a week, delivering to about 600 locations that were pickup sites for those individuals. So we did no home delivery, all delivery through these pickup locations. And when COVID hit, we essentially knew that all pickup sites were going to close and that we would have no business. Within 1 week's time, and thank you to the PPP and all the other aid that has been given to small businesses, we were able to pivot, essentially convert to entirely home delivery. Felt like overnight. And without your program, I would say that we would have a business that looked very different, and one that I don't even want to imagine.
Thank God.
Thanks to you. And I'm sure other companies have their own similar story of survival. And thankfully, we now deliver to 500 homes. So fewer individuals than we did before, but nonetheless, we're still getting all this great food from local farms and local makers into hands of individuals. And without the PPP, we wouldn't be saying that. So, again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Waterman. Well said.
Let me
Yes, time to.
do my job.
We didn't used to do this pre-COVID.
The podium's much cleaner.
Yes. one result. They have very clean microphones these days. One other point, also, state and local aid, vital part of our HEROES bill, vital, needed in the capital region. And I visited local mayors and local county executives, and they said, send some of the money directly to us. So now half the money will go to the state, and half the money will go to the localities, again, as a result of these tours that we do. Questions on this subject first? Yes?
Senator, how soon do you think this would pass?
Well, we're working to the HEROES bill. What I mentioned has passed the House, and we're working very hard to get a bipartisan bill passed in the Senate before the end of session by Christmas.
And what are you looking forward to in the state of New York for small businesses from the next administration?
Well, we hope that they will continue this. This is a bill that has bipartisan support, Democrat and Republican, and we hope it'll be passed now and then continued in the new administration. President-elect Biden supports the proposal. He supports the whole HEROES Act with many of the things I mentioned, including the PPP. Other questions?
Yes, Senator. And so now that the election is over, how does that change the dynamic of the negotiations?
Well, look, the bottom line is that we've always said we need a bill that meets the needs of the American people, and now we hope Leader McConnell will work with us on such a bill, pass it in a bipartisan way, and get it done as soon as we can.
Senator, what's your mood right now?
My mood is fighting for the people. We have so many needs, and we have a second round of COVID that's coming. Our hospitals, I was in Lewis County right here, a nice hospital, the only hospital in the county, they're now paying for testing because they don't have the money for testing and there aren't enough tests that are given. We're proposing that they get money for testing. There's $9 billion sitting there. So my mood is one of always hope. I'm always trying to be hopeful, but redoubling efforts to get this done. It's so important. As I visit these counties and listen to people like Mr. Waterman, look what they've done. They've innovated, but their business still isn't as good as it used to be. They need more help. They'll be back better than ever if we overcome COVID. But our job at the federal level is to help people through this crisis. There are some who say the federal government shouldn't help. I disagree. That's the only place that can help. The state doesn't have the dollars, the localities don't have the dollars, the small businesses and private sector doesn't have the dollars.
There's a fight over some of the unspent money, like the Main Street loan program that Newschannel wants to
That would be renewed.
So you want to keep that going?
Yes, yes, the Main Street, yes, I do. In addition to the PPP, that would be for larger businesses in some localities.
How much PPP, how much would that?
The PPP, well, we have to negotiate it, but there's still about $130 billion in the pipeline. It's just sitting there because we have to renew the program. And because, by the way, they only get one bite at, pardon the pun, one bite at the apple. Because when the bill was passed in March and I helped write it, we said by summer COVID will be gone. Well, it's not, so we need to renew it.
So businesses can only get one PPP loan?
Another one. No, they get a second one under this proposal. Yeah.
Senator, you mentioned...
Wait, them.
So with this program, I know that many business owners have talked about issues, I guess in the first round with payroll, and I know you said you need to work on...
Yes, it's going to be much easier for them. The loan forgiveness will be easier, and they have much more flexibility in how to use the money.
Can you just give some details on...
Well, for instance, early on, if you had a significant non-payroll expense, utilities, rent, you name it, an unusual expense, you couldn't use the money for that. In this bill, you can.
With regard to the counties and the mayors clamoring for direct aid, Senator, you mentioned that. Why is it important to get them the money directly rather than going through Albany?
It's when you go through Albany, it takes longer. We're giving Albany the money the governor says it needs in this bill, but it should also go directly to the localities. They didn't get, because there was a shortage of funds, a lot of them didn't get any money under the first bill, only the bigger places.
Because the state didn't share.
Well, I don't know if you want to put it that way, but there wasn't enough to go around. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving to one and all.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, it's running out like this program, and I hope it is continued. It's in the HEROES Act, it is continued. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.